So the first part of our review will be a practical hands-on kind of thing. And then we'll be talking about concepts from our textbook. And in your study guide, there's a new version of the study guide in here. It's been posted in the references folder. So you have topic summaries. These are the amended slides. But this is revision 2 of the Module 3 study guide. And basically what we're going to do today is cover a few of our topics and this first insider secret. And we'll also try to cover some of our other areas. Any questions so far?
Not for me.
Okay. So we told you that it was best to use role-based access control, and that was to establish intentional permissions for your system and data, right? And what often happens is that exposures creep in. When I say creep in, I mean, well, you set up a new server and you set up a new environment, and in a domain, right, when you're talking about an Active Directory domain, an enterprise environment, you go to an awful lot of trouble to set up a server correctly. Each of you have virtual machines you can remotely access, and there was a good bit of care and love involved, for lack of a better term, right, to set everything up. But eventually what happens is that users get involved, layer 8, right? And it has to do with privilege use. Usually what happens is that you have great systems and the security is locked down and everything is as it should. And lo and behold, somebody gets on the internet. And they go out on the internet and they find out that they need a new PDF tool because they want to start signing forms and creating forms with PDFs. And so some of your users go out online and here you are, this systems security professional, and you've done all this hard work and you're ready to go home at a decent hour, and they decide they want to start with electronic signatures with their PDFs, and then they want to do some things with forms, and they identify this low cost or this free software, right? Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you say, hey, you really ought to be using Adobe. And they say, Adobe's expensive. We don't have money for that. So they find this software and they actually do some homework, to their credit. And they find out that Capterra is very cost effective and it's lower in cost. And they want to install it on their system. And do you remember how we said that you wanted to go to the trouble to create different users who were not administrators? That when you were on the internet and when you were using email, you wanted to be using a user account that was not a local administrator? Does everybody remember that? Something like that? The first account that's created on a system is usually a problem, and it usually has the word administrator, or who's going to use this account. It's the first account that you set up when you set up a system, and it has root privileges or administrator privileges. And we explained that if you get online, if you're on the internet, or you're using social media apps, or you're using messaging apps, or you're doing email, you should not have an account that you log into that has local administrative privileges on that system, because if you encounter any links or any issues and you click on those, then they execute with administrative privileges. Does everybody remember this? Something about this? Anything about this?
Yes.
It's called the first.
Yeah.
It's called the first account exposure. Remember this? Okay. So let's pretend that I have an HR director, and this is the HR director's account. And the HR director is absolutely convinced that they need to start using PDFs with digital signatures in order to review and interview job candidates, right? Because that's what HR directors do. They handle personnel. You with me so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're logged in on their system. And you review what's going on and you say, okay, all right, I'll let you install Capterra. I'll let you do this. You know, go ahead and install it on your system. And let's pretend that this is the HR director's account and it's not an administrative account. Here's what happens. 9 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10. Support staff and users alike insist on changing account privileges to root or administrator levels. Here's what happens. The HR director starts to install the Capterra software. But if the HR director is not an administrator, what do you think happens most of the time? Is the HR director allowed to make changes to the software loaded on the system if they're not an administrator?
No.
Nope. No, they aren't. So what does the HR director say to the support staff? Oh, hey, if I'm going to put this software on my system, you know, you're busy. You're in the help desk. You're always putting out brush fires on the servers and the network. You don't have time for this, but you said it was okay. You said it was okay for me to use this. And you're a dedicated security professional and you say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go ahead and install it on your system. I'll be down there. So you do what you're supposed to do. And then the user, the HR director, and we're pretending this is their account name, right? They log in and lo and behold, the first time they run Capterra, it asks them to do additional things to configure the software so it works right. Oh, you have to set up a digital signature. That means we have to set up a certificate. What kind of privileges does that involve? Oh, administrative privileges, right? So then it says, hey, you don't have permissions to do this, right? Here's the problem. Sooner or later, that HR director gets fed up and they're like, okay, you were so good about security, you loaded it, but now that I'm logged in, I'm supposed to set up my own user profile for Capterra. By that we mean the user profile inside the user's folder. Okay, what do I mean by user's folder? Inside my C drive, I have a user's, we've all talked about this, right? User profiles are inside here. This is where the data for a given user account is stored. So here's the when connected account. There's the owner account, right? So in order for the software to work right, it has to be able to make changes. And the problem is that very many software packages do not account for a user with standard privileges. Many software packages that are created for some goofy reason, they don't configure and structure the software so that standard users can just start using it without requiring administrative privileges. And what happens is that this causes a problem. And eventually the HR director pulls rank and calls your boss and says, I'm still trying to get my digital signature set up. And we're supposed to hire your new vice president. But your IT security person is well, they're just kind of stuck in the ice age and they insist on doing things the hard way. And I can't get this to work. And I don't have a budget to buy the fancy schmancy expensive Adobe software, right? Okay, well, we're adding some drama to this, but the point is that social engineers and users alike share a common character flaw. They all like to go nuts when they don't get what they want. And so they insist that the user be given privileges. And here's what happens. Somebody goes into the control panel and they change the account type and they're like, oh, all right, already. Okay, HR requires special software. So I guess our HR director is going to have to be an administrator of the local machine. System security experts know this isn't true. But this is what everybody practices, almost everywhere, exclusively, and 99 times out of 100 environments, right? In 99 out of 100 environments, workplace environments, a lot of the support staff get to the place where they just get sick and tired of all this. And then they conclude, well, okay, the HR director is a special case. The only problem with that is that your accountant, well, they're special too. Don't you know that accountants have special software? Like Peachtree Accounting for the accountant, and their software is important, right? And they have to have their software because Peachtree Accounting is like a gold standard for accountants. And they have to have Peachtree Accounting software, right? And so they're special too. So before you know it, now the accounting staff has administrative rights. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. Oh no. Did you know payroll? Everybody wants your paycheck, don't you? Do you think your paychecks should be held up because the payroll staff can't use the ADP payroll software to generate your paychecks? And let's say you're a big company. Let's say you have 100 employees. Do you think the 100 employees want to get their paycheck a couple of days late because the payroll staff could not load the payroll software to generate everybody's paycheck? What do you think happens? Oh, the IT staff gets another phone call. Hey, this time the special person in payroll needs to be an administrator. And here's the problem. None of that's true. Not a bit. In fact, when you try to work that drill, it's hugely disappointing. Does everybody remember inheritance? Everybody remember inheritance? Hello? Role-based access control, inheritance? All right, walk with me through this, okay? We're going to pretend that the Google Chrome directory is, take your pick, the really cool free PDF digital signature software, okay? That's what we're going to pretend. Just for giggles, okay? Or, take your pick, this Google directory, let's say it's the, who was the other case? Oh, the Peachtree Accounting software, right? We're in program files right here, yes, everybody? And let's pretend that this is Peachtree Accounting software. Or let's pretend that it's ADP payroll software instead of saying Google. Is everybody with me?
No.
Watch this. Does this look familiar?
Yeah, it does.
Uh-huh. You know what happens when you change permissions? And then you get rid of this. And you remove. Let's remove users. Oh, it's inheriting permissions. What do we do? I'm going to disable inheritance and convert. I'm going to remove users. I don't want just any user to do Google. Let's pretend that this is payroll software and I don't want just any user to do there, okay? Watch this. What was my notional user account when connected? I mean, that's what I called it, but let's pretend it reads payroll staff or accounting professional or HR director. I'm going to go to this screen right here, and I'm going to add when connected. But let's pretend this is the accountant, okay? Or the payroll. Full control. Everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay. I put full control on here, and then I check this box, and then I hit apply, and magically, the standard user can do everything he or she ever needed to do. Didn't matter if it was Peachtree accounting software or free PDF digital signature software or payroll software. Suddenly, they're able to do everything they need to do. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about holding the line on giving people only the absolute minimum they need for resources and privilege use to accomplish an important task, right? And that includes users. What will happen is that advanced persistent threats, and those are really feisty, live, active, malicious people. Everybody remembers the Russians were trying to get on our system last week, right? Everybody remembers that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Russians were trying to get on our system. That's an advanced persistent threat. My son and I discovered that they were redirecting that attack to one of your classmates' systems through China. They had infected Chinese systems, and they were redirecting their malicious attack through Chinese hosts before they started to get on your servers. These are very persistent people. Think of the trouble they go to set up an infected system in China where they can relay an attack so that it doesn't come back to haunt them. That's pretty smart. What am I telling you? The average threats that are waiting to end your credibility as a system security person are counting on you caving and providing administrative privileges to people who don't deserve them. Your users are not administrators. They shall never have administrative privileges. But then the problem is the software doesn't install right, and then they can't get started with it right. And that's because people don't get that when you install the software as an administrator, before you turn it over to the user, all you got to do is add their explicit permissions with inheritance. Full control for the software they need to work with. And that specific resource in that directory for that user, the user by themselves, the users do not have administrative privileges over the system. But they have all the rights they need for the software to function correctly. You would think that software application developers would create an installation guide that says, oh, if you want to use our software safely, you don't have to make your users who want our software administrators on your machines. They don't have to have administrative privileges. Just take the directory for our software and give them full control over where it is in the program files directory. Okay? And everybody's happy. And yet, computer science graduates and computer engineering graduates the world over just don't get that part. They don't document that kind of stuff. They create software that requires what? Somebody to be promoted to a system administrator with administrative privileges, root privileges, in order to be able to install, configure, and start using an application. And by that time, well, just try getting administrative privileges back from the HR director or the payroll person or the accounting person after they couldn't do their job because you wanted to do security. They're going to cry and they're going to say, when they gave me this right, I could do what I needed to. Do you want your paycheck? They're going to play the politics card. Users and hackers. Hackers are wolves. Users are sheep. But both of them can get a shepherd into trouble. Do you understand what I'm saying? They can both get shepherds into trouble. So what you got to do is you got to say, look, when we install software for you and everybody's special, you're going to keep your standard privileges because you're not a system administrator. I am the system administrator. When something goes boom in the night and your data is exposed and we don't have money in our bank account anymore, you're not going to jail. I am going to jail because my system wasn't secure. I am not giving you full permissions over my system. You have to assert. You have to be as persistent as the advanced persistent threat, which means you got to understand how social engineering works. When we talk about exposures and the bad guys, everybody see this term right here? Social engineers. These are people who whine and complain to get their way until they get their way. That's the definition of social engineers. Now, hackers have developed that capability to a unholy level. And they pretend to be somebody else. And then they say, hey, your board meeting is meeting and your president's going to look stupid. Don't you want to fix this problem? I need you to click on this button on the screen. And then some poor user clicks on the button and a hacker talks a user into doing something they shouldn't. Sometimes they do it through email. That's called phishing. Everybody knows this, right? You get phishing email address. You get email messages that say, oh, your system's going to blow up unless you click this, right? Okay. Any questions on what we've covered so far?
None so far.
Absolute minimum of the resources and privileges you need. Let's talk about resources. We were talking about privilege use before when we were talking about, hey, you're installing software, it's custom software, and you have specialists in your environment, and your users are all special. They're all special people. All your users are special people. But they're gonna beg, borrow, and plead. They're gonna say, remember, I helped you get that raise. Remember, I helped you get promoted. Remember when you did that report for the board? I fixed that problem for you. Oh, remember I helped you get approved for the extra time off when your baby was born? They're going to pull every stunt in the book. They don't want to be restricted. You have to tell them. Everybody is a standard user on our systems. I'm going to keep you out of jail and I'm going to keep me out of jail. Now let's talk about other aspects of software development. Software engineers and computer science students, when they graduate, they're not likely to change their habits. Just remember, you can always get software to work, even if it doesn't say everybody has to be an administrator to install and use the software. Just do what you learned with RBAC. Give the user the permissions they need going inside the program files directory. Find the software folder and turn on inheritance for full control and you're done. And that standard user has every ability to do anything with that software they ever need to do. Now, here's another problem. Memory allocations. Can everybody see this? Data types. Okay. Does everybody know what an integer is as a data type? For my computer science students, you know that there's a special data.
Yeah.
there is a data type called integer. It has to do with whole numbers, right?
Right.
And you're telling your computer, okay, we're working with numbers, and these numbers do not have decimal points. Okay? Everybody on the same page?
Yep.
Okay. Now, have you heard of the term double integer?
Yeah.
Okay. There might be other terms that apply in some programs.
No.
Well, let's say that you're dealing with whole numbers, but then in some cases, your software program is dealing with really, really big whole numbers. Okay? Everybody with me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's say that you're a software developer. And you don't like having to fix bugs. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're developing software. It's a custom solution. You're getting paid lots of money by a Fortune 500 company. It involves a database. Okay. Everybody with me so far? And you don't want to have to go back and keep making changes. And you hope that the big company that hired you to do this loves your software so much, they tell everybody else. They tell all their other friends about it. Okay. See, these are data types right here, double and long double, right? And I want you to notice that one is a 32-bit size and one's a 64-bit size. And the double data type reserves 8 bytes of space for a given data element to be stored. Okay, everybody with me?
Yes.
Long double, really, really big, right? Long double, or really, really big whole numbers, takes 16 bytes. How many bits is that? Well, 16 times 8. 128 bits. Okay? Now, here's the fun part. Let's say that we don't store a null value by default when we're creating our variables. Everybody knows what I mean when I'm saying that we're initializing a variable. All right, so let's say we're writing software, we want to use a variable to store whole numbers, really, really big whole numbers, but we're not careful, so we don't store a non-value, a null value in that data type, in that field. Okay, everybody with me?
I am.
I'm creating a very large empty bucket, only I'm not insisting that the empty bucket be empty by initializing that variable with a null value. So what I'm saying is I'm setting up the storage area. It's big, but I'm not requiring it to be empty by default when it's initiated, when it's implemented and the software program runs. Okay. What we have here is a case where there's extra memory. Okay. Anytime you have improper sizing of memory allocations for the data types in your application design, and let's say that you want to be practical, okay? Your first customers only have whole numbers that get to be so big. But you know that if a lot of people buy your stuff, there's much larger companies that are going to have much bigger numbers. And you don't want to have to redesign your software so that much bigger companies with much bigger whole numbers can't use your software. So you're going to use a long double data type, right? You're going to use a lot of memory when you design your software. And the problem with that approach is if you have a lot of extra space and it's automatically allocated and the defaults do not specify, hey, when you stand up that resource, the initial value is a non-value. You don't insist that the first thing that goes in there is nothing. It's like creating a Hotel California for a hacker with all the empty rooms and no locks on the doors. Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? That's a line from the movie Rush Hour.
Yep.
Chris Rock. Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Right. Ain't nobody understand the words that are coming out of your mouth. All right. I know that was a little bit of a sideline there. You need to practice a minimalist approach to the specification of data types in memory. It'll greatly reduce system resources that are used to perpetuate a specific kind of attack. In fact, when you have malicious code, a hacker has just a few key objectives. If they're good and they hack the planet, all they need is a little bit of breathing room to stuff something in a buffer, right? Well, buffer overflow is a little different, but the point is that if you have memory allocation sloppy, then malicious code has room to breathe. It has a home to take up in. And when you are not careful about how you structure your memory management, I'm talking about data structures, right? CSE 242 and that kind of thing. What happens is that you have too much real estate in digital terms that your malicious people can use. And anytime they have extra memory to work with, they can insert and execute malicious code. And the more memory they have, the worse it is. Another needless absolute minimum, right? So we talk about the absolute minimum that people need to do their job. This one kills me. NetBIOS is a network protocol. Has anyone ever seen this screen before where I went to like the network and I opened up my stuff and I went in here and I go into properties and I go into this and I go into, I know I'm really going like way into the weeds here. Everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. See the default right here? So I have a wireless router. And my wireless router is made by a popular company. Could be Linksys, could be D-Link, could be Netgear, could be Cisco, could be TP-Link, whatever. The point is that I have a wireless router that's pretty good. And I paid money for that thing. And it's going to give me an automatic network address. And you know what's really cool that's not so cool is when I go to Office Max and I buy a new printer and I hook up that printer on my network and it's a wireless printer. Yay! I don't have to have a cable to connect my laptop to my printer so I can print something. Yay! The printer is wireless and my laptop is wireless and my smartphone is wireless. So I can even print pictures from my smartphone. Yay! Everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Yep. And when they first came out with printers in a galaxy far, far away, a long, long time ago, they used to have this protocol called NetBIOS. And it was how primitive devices talk to each other on a much lower network level. Kind of like layer 2 kind of stuff, but not. It's a layer 3 protocol. It's an older protocol and it uses something called WinS. Before they had the internet and they had domain name service, they had to have ways of devices finding each other on the network. And printers had to advertise their names. What am I saying? Printers, scanners, fax machines, all sorts of technology would have to basically get on a network. And everybody was a chatty Cathy. So everybody chattered like a chipmunk. They were just, you know, hey, I'm here. The printer's ready. It's ready for a print. It's ready. Hey, your photos are ready, right? And they would do that kind of stuff. The problem is that NetBIOS is not only inefficient, it's relatively insecure. The reason that NetBIOS settings are enabled by default when you get an automatic assignment from a DHCP server, the NetBIOS setting is enabled. And it runs on top of TCP IP. Now, TCP IP has enough security challenges without strapping some outdated piece of garbage on top. What we should do instead is configure our DHCP server to issue an IP address where NetBIOS is disabled. You'd be shocked. I've showed you this before, right? Where I went on, I went into File Explorer and I said, hey, you can browse directories, but did you know you can browse your own network? Has everybody seen this before?
Think so.
Yep. I'm going to turn on network discovery just so you see what happens. When NetBIOS is turned on and network discovery is turned on, oh, watch out. And usually in a lot of home environments, when people load their software for their printers and such, network discovery is, well, it's kind of in the mix. Advanced sharing settings. Oh, yeah. Oh, of course. I have like streaming music and stuff, and I have a media server, you know, it's this cool thing that I got from Amazon, and I can put my music on there and everybody in my family can play my music, right? That's called file and print sharing. Everybody knows that, right? Oh yeah, turn on network discovery. See, in order for that to work, usually that's turned on and the NetBIOS is turned on. And if I click here now, let's cancel all this. Oh, yeah, let's do this. I did turn off NetBIOS, didn't I? Didn't I? I thought I did. Oh, the default. Okay, so the default is still in place. I'm going to click OK. So NetBIOS over TCP/IP is still there. Now, your mileage may vary. Sometimes you got to like disconnect, reconnect, or reset your network service or reboot your machine. So this may or may not work, but I'm going to try to see what happens here. I'm going to click my network here and see. Oh. Oh, you know what that is? That's my TV. And I have a thumb drive with pictures on my TV. Did you know I can just double click on this and see my pictures on my TV now? I'm just pretending that's the case,
Really?
but yeah. Well, see, when you can browse the network and you connect to a device, then when you double click inside there, sometimes it opens up, especially if it's PCs and laptops and mobile devices.
Mm-hmm.
If there are storage devices embedded in that system, now you're inside the folders. So you can go digging inside the device, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, I'm oversimplifying here, and I have set up extra security in my own home network. So basically, it's just what's connected in one room. So you're only seeing my TV. But the point is that you couldn't see my TV in my network neighborhood before, could you? If you are doing this and you leave your defaults in place, NetBIOS, it's an old setting. You have to, and see, this is a beef of mine with Windows. I'm like, really? This is a 25-year-old protocol, and it's like putting a screen door in a submarine. And you have to turn it on by default in 2022 with IPv6 and LGE. I mean, you have all of these better cellular. You have 5G and 4G LTE, and you've got all of this cool stuff to connect things and you're still fishing in the 25-year-old barrel. What is wrong with that? That should be disabled by default, right? Now, the cool part. On Friday, we're going to turn up some of your remote screens, and we're going to show you how you can use a group policy object to enforce these settings. You can configure the entire system. In fact, does everybody see this right here? Application whitelisting.
Yeah.
Okay. In a domain environment like groovy.local, the one you just did role-based access control with, yeah, we have centralized security account management. We have a domain. All of your login accounts are stored on the domain controllers. We can use a group policy object, and we can use something called application whitelisting. It's called App Locker. And we can make sure that certain machines only allow you to run Calculator, Outlook, a certain browser. You can basically specify which apps are allowed to run. Everything else by default does not run. That solves a lot of problems. You can also configure advanced startup options. Your drive maps are automatically loaded so that your drive letters on network shares are configured in advance. You can do that with group policy. You can configure Microsoft, the Microsoft operating system to start up in a certain manner, right? So you can basically say, when my system starts up, I want you to, we're going to execute some things when we boot our system, and it's going to enforce my policy. Okay. There is a command where you enforce a group policy, and on domain computers, if you type the command gpupdate/force, it basically refreshes the policy. You can, in a domain environment, say, whenever I shut down my system, whenever I boot up my system, it's going to enforce my system policies. My system policies automate the configuration of my environment so that in the domain environment, I can say, you're only getting updates from, you're only using this DNS server, you're only running these applications. And I can do all of that with my group policy objects, right? So on Friday, if you would, I need everybody to be ready. I want you to check before the start of class to make sure you can access your remote system, okay? We're going to do some things in class together using the group policy, okay? So we can change some settings so you see how this, how we can use the domain environment to reduce our exposures, right? And it can be as simple as, okay, everybody had my NetBIOS enabled, and then after I make the group policy object, you restart your system and everybody looks in there, and presto changeo, you look inside and NetBIOS is disabled. And when you go here to browse your network, nothing shows up. Nobody can get into your Kool-Aid across the network just by browsing the network, okay? All of that comes from the notion that you need to develop and cultivate this minimalist attitude, okay? And I know we spent a lot of time on this. Do we have 60 more seconds in our class? Can everybody hang tight for 60 more seconds?
I can.
Okay. Have you heard of the term chief financial officer? This is the VP of finance in most companies or organizations. The money
Yeah.
person. Yeah, the person in charge of all the money. Okay. Yeah. And there's another position that has to do with finances and businesses. It's called the controller or comptroller. Have you ever heard of that professional responsibility? It's a career path, right? They're money people.
Yeah.
Yeah, they run all the finances in the organization. Did you know that part of their professional training is learning the fine art of telling people no? They tell people no. A good finance person is gifted at saying it's not in the budget. You can do this next season when it's in your budget. But if we're going to control our finances so you get a paycheck, so that we get a holiday bonus, so that we can operate next year and keep the doors on, the doors open and the lights on, they're gifted at defining the financial absolute minimum. What do administrators do? Corporate presidents do. Did you know that corporation administrators, the chief executive officer, they spend their professional career paths learning in part the fine art of saying no. A chief executive officer, the president of a company, they spend part of their professional education learning how to tell people, I'm sorry, we have policies and procedures. I'm sorry, I have to fire you because you're not meeting expectations. I'm sorry, you can't take vacation off because we have an important mission critical project and you're essential to this project going well. And everybody's livelihood depends on it. You have to do this. And don't worry, I'm going to be here. I'm going to provide all the resources you need. But no, you can't take extra time off right now. What I'm trying to tell you is, if you want to be good as a system security officer anywhere, if you want to reduce exposures and shut down the bad guys, one of the first things you need to understand is that everybody wants extra. Everybody's going to try to influence you. Everybody's going to claim that you're their best friend. And you have to be just as good at everyone else at saying no. We're not using extra memory just because it's easier. We're not enabling that we're not leaving that default enabled just so that when you bring something home from Office Max so you can plug it in and it just works. I'm sorry. I know it was on sale. It's an old printer. That's why it was on sale. But I'm not compromising my security because you got an old printer on sale. Everybody see what I'm saying? Half of this is about the tech. The other half of this is understanding human nature. This is the one I want you to remember the most. Don't you ever, never, so long as you shall live, having taken this course in system security, if it's the only thing you remember from the entire semester, please, when somebody tells you they have to have administrative privileges because their software won't run, you remember this day. You remember my near tears in explaining and showing you, you already know how to do this. You already know how to do this. You go into a folder, you go into properties, you give them permissions, but in this case, it's the software folder, right? Give the user full control of the software folder where the application is installed, and they can remain a standard user, and they won't hurt you, and they won't hurt themselves. And that's all I have to share today. Any questions before we close? Above all else, never ever. We taught you how to do the RBAC role-based access control thing, but when they come back around and they say, oh, they got to give you administrator, you got to give them administrator. You got to change their privilege level. be nice, smile and quack, do the same thing the CEO does, the same thing the primary financial person does for an organization. Tell them, hey, there's a good way to do this and a bad way to do this. Give me a second, I'll fix it. And then go in there and give them full control over the software directory. But don't ever give them administrator. Never, ever. Okay? Are we good? Any
Good
questions?
with me.
Any questions or comments? It's a thing of beauty. I've actually had all kinds of like commercial software and custom built software over a 20-year period. And it's amazing. People are like, you have to give me administrator. No, I don't. But I'll fix it. And how's it working for you now? Oh, yeah, it's great. And then they go out on the internet. The first thing they do when they're out on the internet is they try to install something else. Because now they're an administrator, they think. And you catch that in the log. And you're like, hey, Tom, I don't know what you were doing trying to load other software, but knock it off, right? Half of being a system security professional is keeping the sheep away from the wolves and reducing their exposure. Okay. All right. Well, I look forward to Friday. We're going to do some hands-on and some demos. It's going to be really cool. I'm going to show you how to piss off a hacker. Totally frustrate them. Oh, and by the way, later that night, my son and I, we paid back that Russian. Yes, we did.
That's cool.
Stay tuned. I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording.